Tonight, I'm going to be talking about how your perspective can bring you peace. Changing that can bring you peace because sometimes, life happens, people annoy us, even strangers annoy us, and we need to take a pause and kind of understand what is going on. I'm going to talk about that. Hopefully, some of you will be joining me, and I'll be drawing some cards as well. And then also, perhaps we'll talk about, what you would like in the group going forward as well. So I'm going to crack on. Let me just check before I do that you can see me and hear me on Facebook, because we all know what Facebook's like. Oh, there you go. Hi, Mayra. Hope you're well. Come and say hello. Just check the sound is working. Yep, it is. Hey, Victoria. How are you? So I'm going to just talk about how changing your perspective can bring you peace. And I'm going to tell you a story, first of all, that involves Marianne Williamson. She was talking about this on Instagram in the last couple of days. And it really helped cement that this was the topic I wanted to talk about this week. So she was talking about, she'd gone to an event and she could hear this woman speaking. And this woman was really annoying her in the sound of how she enunciated her words, how she spoke. And Marianne Williamson was just saying, it really grated with her. And she was having a dialogue inside her mind about, has no one taught this person how to speak? Why are they sounding so weird and funny? What's wrong with them? That kind of dialogue, that inner monologue was in full flow. Anyway, she didn't say anything, and the woman who was speaking strangely moved off, and someone else leant into Marianne Williamson and said in a really quiet voice, isn't it amazing, despite everything she, the woman who's moved away, has been through, that she's able to speak and be normal in public. At which point, Marianne Williamson said, well, what happened to her? And she found out that this woman who spoke strangely had to learn how to talk as an adult, because she was one of those unfortunate people who'd been held in a dungeon by her own family, I think her dad. And so until she was about 18 or 19, she hadn't actually spoken to anyone. So she'd had to learn. And what Marianne Williamson was saying, obviously that's a really shocking thing for anyone to experience and to even meet someone. It's so unusual and so shocking. But what Marianne Williamson realized is that if she had taken a moment to pause when she heard that story, before she'd even heard that story, if she had taken a moment to pause, perhaps she would have allowed herself to stop the judgment and think more kindly or compassionately to that person. She could have thought, for example, perhaps there's a problem with her jaw, so she can't enunciate properly. It may not be visible, but it still could be there. Or perhaps this person is from somewhere completely different and so has an unusual way of speaking. Different countries have different rhythms in their language as they speak. And she realized the value of that compassionate pause, but also how as soon as she understood this person's experience, how her inner monologue went completely quiet. And she was able, therefore, to actually look at the situation in a new way. She had to be kind to herself as well as she was looking at this, because Marianne Wilson could have been really horrible to herself and really critical of herself, of the way she judged this other woman. But instead, she approached it as, okay, I judged from a place of not understanding and not being informed. And in that moment, that was okay. It wasn't good. It wasn't a great thing to do, but it was okay because I didn't know enough and I wasn't aware of enough. And so the kindness she was showing actually was to herself, because this other woman who spoke with oddly had no idea that Marianne Williamson was judging her in this really harsh way. And so when we bring new perspectives to situations we're in, one of the benefits of that is we can stop judging ourselves so harshly. And this fits into love for me first, right? Because if what you don't do or say or think or how you behave isn't loving to you first, then it cannot be loving to anyone else either, right? So another really common example is when we have a relative who is perhaps suffers from anxiety or is not able to work full time. I certainly have members of my family where this is true. It would be really easy for me to judge them and to be like, oh, for God's sake, what's wrong with them? Because I'm human and, I sometimes fall prey to these things. Okay. But actually, if I take a pause and I reflect on the monologue, it could be that actually what's motivating that monologue is a feeling of guilt, a feeling of, I wish I could do more for them. I wish I could help them more. And maybe feeling guilt that I'm not doing enough or not understanding enough or not being enough, when actually that's not your responsibility. But the guilt monologue might be saying that to you. Then there'll be another part of the monologue that might be feeling aggrieved. Oh, look at them. They get away with not working. Everyone's really sympathetic to them. If it was me, no one would feel that way to me. So can you see how this monologue that we all have in our heads sometimes can be made up of different emotions that are making us then look at someone else's situation in the harshest possible light? Now, the problem with that, apart from the lack of compassion, is what it's doing to you and how it's affecting your vibration, because that monologue will be dropping your vibration. What that monologue is also doing is really making you feel small, unloved, perhaps abandoned, perhaps uncared for, thinking I wouldn't get the same levels of help that so and so would get. And so what it's doing is really, really making you disconnect from love for yourself, love for the planet, love in general, divine love as well. It's making you disconnect from all those things. And so my challenge to you guys this week will be to notice your inner monologue. Notice when someone is winding you up. And when you notice it, take a deep breath, an actual physical deep breath. You might need to take 3 deep breaths or 5 deep breaths or 10 deep breaths in order to allow the irritation to settle. And then ask the question, why am I feeling this way? What am I reacting to? And I'm talking to you about this from a really personal perspective. Some of you may know I have a sister. About 4 years ago, she decided that I had done something so awful she wasn't going to speak to me. And it hurt. I grieved for that relationship and for her for a very, very long time. And I had this monologue going on in my head. How dare she? Who does she think you are? I was really kind of angry with her for doing this. Apart from the grief and the hurt, there was a lot of anger. There was a lot of recrimination in my thoughts. There was a lot of not feeling supported by other members of my family because they didn't want to get involved, or I felt that they were being more on my sister's side. It was tough, right? But over the years, and we are talking again, so things have changed. We're not in that place anymore. But over the years, the thing I had to learn, and I had to learn it several times, I did not get this from the get-go. The thing I had to learn was that monologue that I had about her was not kind, it was not considerate, and it was not loving to me. And I began to notice the effect it had on me. And the effect it had on me was to feel miserable, to feel really grief-stricken and sad. to feel very unloved and abandoned in a way that I hadn't experienced for a very, very long time. You know, early on in my healing journey, that was a theme that I had going on. So I had to then go, okay, how am I going to change this monologue, right? And I had to take several deep breaths because this was a habitual monologue that had gained some traction. Because I was like, I'm not that person anymore. I do energetics every day. That's why the group's called this. I practice my energetics daily. I know better. I know that I am capable of changing my behavior, of asking my higher self for help, for asking my higher self to give me more understanding about the situation, more clarity of how she's feeling, of how I'm feeling, how those two sets of feelings are clashing and making things bigger or worse or contributing. I know I can do all of those things. And so the way I changed my inner monologue was, first of all, noticing. And every time I noticed it, I would deliberately change my thoughts away from her to something else, something that I loved, something that made me happy. It could be my son or my husband. It could be my book. It could be my business. It could be my soul sisters who are, you know, so precious to me in this group. It could be any number of things. But the thing I turned to was the thing that made me smile, and it raised my vibration. So what I was doing was breaking that monologue. I then went to Athalia, my higher self. For those of you who've not been in the group very long, you may not know this. My higher self is called Athalia. And Athalia began to show me some new perspectives around this, right? She began to show me that some of what my sister was experiencing and putting on me was actually all about her. And I was just the target. It had nothing to do with me, but I was getting the brunt of it. Some of it was about me needing to improve my behaviors towards her. There was some culpability, and I needed to admit it, and I needed to apologize for it, which I've done, right? And the apology actually wasn't really about how she responded. It was about me stepping up and owning my behavior and going, that wasn't great. I need to improve that. I apologize. And in that apology, I'm also forgiving myself for making those mistakes. Because remember, whenever you are changing your perspective in order to find peace, you are always showing it to yourself first, right? So when I made the apology, I was making an apology to myself for behaving badly and for taking that time. It might have taken a long time, I can't quite remember now, to get to that point. I was apologizing for the monologue that I had kept, that kept me in that sad place. And so the other things Athalia showed me, so she showed me perspectives on both sides. She showed me my culpability. And then she showed me, and this was also with the help of Domain, the energy holding that I practice, she also showed me that the answer was love. The answer is always love, right? And I was like, really? Is that, it seemed too simplistic. But do you know what? When I connected to Athalia and I said, can you connect to my sister's higher self? And can you just flow unconditional love from me to her? And all I want her to feel, if she feels it at all, is that I accept her for who she is, with all her anger and her anxiety and everything that she was experiencing. I was not going to try and change that experience for her. I wasn't going to try and rescue her, which was a habit of mine. I wasn't going to go, this is all your fault. And in that process, I was forgiving anyone that I felt hadn't been supportive to me, and also who hadn't sided me, or I felt had sided with her. And so I started to dismantle my perspective of I was right, I'm the wronged party, and instead began to develop a perspective of, actually, I don't really know what else was going on for her. I admit my part in it, and I understand I provoked her. but I don't know what else is going on. And for her to have not talked to me for this long seems a bit of an overreaction. But I'm not going to judge that overreaction. Hey, Denise, I'm going to instead just continue to send love to her. And as I did that, my own anger began to heal, my hurt began to heal, and my perspective shifted completely. And it became one of, it's okay that she is where she is, and that there is a gap between us, and that the gap at the moment, at that time, felt unbridgeable. But over time, actually, as I've continued to send love to her through our higher selves, the gap has got smaller and smaller, and we're talking again, and we're rebuilding that relationship. And so there is a value, and it's really important you understand this, that when we're asking you to change your perspective about a difficult situation, something that really winds you up, really challenges you, what we're actually asking you to do is change your perspective about yourself and know how worthy you are of having peace, peace of mind, peace of spirit, peace of heart. You are worthy of all of that. And so you get to choose, am I ready to be worthy of all those things? Now, if you're not ready, absolutely okay, because you have free will in this. But if you're not ready, I'm going to ask you as a second call to action is start noticing your inner monologue. Start noticing, is it playing the victim? Is it maybe shaming the other person? Is it judging the other person really harshly? And just keep a note of that somewhere. That's all you need to do. Because as soon as you notice your inner monologue, you'll think, do you know what? I really love that person. They're my parent, sibling, spouse, child, whatever it is, whatever that relationship might be, colleague, might be teacher. And you may not love them like you do your family, but you will love them because they are human and you are human. But you might just think, I don't want to be that person anymore. And actually, what I want to experience is peace. I want to experience a peace of mind that cannot be easily ruffled and know that I have the tools to help myself find that peace. And as you make that choice, you're choosing love for me first. Because the most loving thing you can do for yourself is enjoy peace of mind and peace of heart. So, if you have any questions about this and you have got a difficult relationship that you are trying to navigate that is driving you a bit nuts, put it in the comments if you're happy to share, and let's see if we can help you get to a new perspective. That would be great, because then it would mean one less person who's generating that low vibration and instead is choosing to become more high vibe. So, my friends, this is all for tonight. I'm going to love you and leave you. If you if you have some perspectives you need some help changing with, you can book in for a session with me. I'm obviously going to tell you to buy the book because it's got a load of useful information. You've got the audios, you've got processes, you've got some stories from my life that will help illustrate the points I'm making. And if you look at the reviews, they're pretty darn good, actually, even if I say so myself. So sending you all lots of love. Watch the replay, use the hashtag replay, and let me know what your perspectives are that need to change that will bring you peace and help you enjoy love for you first. All right. Take care now. Lots of love, and I'll see you soon.